Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual education event. My name is Bobby Parker with Beyond Clean. Before we get started with this next presentation, I want to call your attention to just a couple of features on your screen. All the windows that you see on your screen are movable, so feel free to move those around, shrink them, enlarge them, do what you need to do to set up that experience that fits your preferences for today's conference. On the lower left, you're going to see a Q&A window. Throughout each of the presentations, we encourage you to enter any questions that you have for the speakers that we can answer during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. In the upper right, you'll see a resources section where you'll find additional resources that you can download and access that are provided to you by our event sponsor. And don't forget, you will also find free CE bonus content in the conference in the references window, along with instructions for downloading and accessing your CE. Now, our next speaker, Monique Albornoz, is the founder and principal owner of Clinical 5S Space Innovations. Her organization helps healthcare facilities optimize their workspace and their workflows. Monique has an extensive background in supply chain and healthcare facility planning and design, and her experience as a master black belt within healthcare lean practices fuels her passion to make lasting impact on healthcare communities. Monique is passionate about creating healthcare environments that are designed to provide the best possible patient care. So how much planning goes into the design of an OR sterile storage area? How do you even begin this planning process? Monique's here to help us explore how the 5S Plus safety framework is improving quality, safety, and cost savings for storage area design process. Monique's also going to demonstrate the value of workspace optimization and explain how you can successfully integrate this sustainable practice into your sterile storage designs. So get ready to discover the tools you need to optimize your storage space. So please join me now in welcoming Monique Albornoz.
Good morning, everyone. Bobby, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So I'm really excited to be here presenting today. I'm going to share a presentation called Optimize Spaces, Happy Faces, Improving Storage Without Causing an Insurrection. I'm excited to discuss how a lean space efficiency framework, known as the 5S plus safety methodology, can help staff share storage areas and avoid conflict, all while reaping the benefits of its application within clinical settings to support quality, safety, cost savings, delivery, morale, and most importantly, patient experience. This is a subject that most people do not learn about when they're in school while they're being educated on how to practice clinical workflows. But it really makes a world of difference in collaboration when you're delivering patient care in the field. The biggest complaint I come across when working in healthcare settings is people saying that they can't find what they need, or there's just not enough space to store the things that they need to do their jobs. The lack of education on how to organize and outfit clinical areas with supplies and equipment is a recipe for disaster and a constant source of aggravation for everyone involved. Who could have ever imagined that fighting for storage space at work was even a problem of this magnitude, and how the downstream effects really could eventually impact patient care? So I hope today you will find the information presented as an opportunity to change how you approach designing and sharing clinical storage spaces with your colleagues. So let's talk about some of the learning objectives for today. My goal for this presentation is to help you get familiar with the 5S plus safety principles so that you can identify opportunities to apply this framework within your own organization. There are many benefits associated with this space optimization methodology, and it's important to understand how it's utilized in hospitals and health systems to create clinical settings that best support patient care. You will learn about the collaborative approach, the value of including your peers, even the ones you wish never existed, areas for application with visual examples of implementation, and performance measures that can be used to implement 5S plus safety projects. That's pretty important because most people want to understand the return on value for making an investment in this type of initiative. So let's talk about the origins of the 5S plus safety framework. Where did it come from, and why is its adoption rate in healthcare so important for our frontline staff and patients? For starters, It's a space efficiency framework derived from lean methodology. It originated in Japan and was created by an engineering educator named Hiroyuki Hirano, who worked for a manufacturing company called Toyota. The system of organizing the workshop and implementing visual management to facilitate the flow of assembly was designed out of a necessity to create just-in-time production. Now, some of you might be familiar with Toyota, the car company, and just-in-time production, as this term has become more popular because of the global supply chain issues that we are experiencing. Well, back to Toyota. As you can imagine, there was a high cost associated with inventory to create cars. And just-in-time production produced only the amount of parts that was needed when it was needed. The 5S techniques being used in Japanese automobile manufacturing grew in popularity and eventually expanded to other countries across the world. Since its introduction in the United States, it has transitioned into many different industries, everything ranging from aerospace to NASCAR. Fortunately, it has migrated into healthcare, where it can be used as an efficiency framework to support clinical and business outcomes. So let's talk more about the 5S plus safety framework. Now that we know the origins of the 5S, we will delve into the application of 5S plus safety within healthcare. So the 5S methodology is the workspace optimization framework that organizes the environment to best support workflows. In healthcare, it's intended to best support clinical care providers attending to patients. The structured approach to setting up workspaces allows occupants to create efficient workplace environments. This results in better operations, products, and services. Ultimately, patient care is a service. It's a fundamental lean practice that embraces building a foundation for standard work, which is the basis for most improvement efforts. 5S methods establish visual management of the environment. And this allows staff to quickly identify when problems arise when they're on the job. The 5S principles are to sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. Aside from a lean environment being clean and organized, the framework ensures that everything has a place to maintain consistency. Removing variation from the environment reduces interruptions to the workflow. And this results in less waste, better quality, and improved productivity. In healthcare, a 5S plus safety program provides clinical and non-clinical employees, patients, and their families the opportunity to experience environments that are tailored for high-quality patient care delivery, support, and outcomes. So the goal really of the 5S application within healthcare is to reduce the amount of interruptions when clinicians are trying to do their job, because their job is tough enough. Okay, so let's review each 5S plus safety principle in its sequence and get more specific about what each one means. So we're going to review in more detail what each 5S principle stands for. The 5 S's are derived from 5 Japanese words, which translate into sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. The first S, which is to sort, means that you eliminate unnecessary items from the workplace. In removing what is not needed and only keeping what is needed to support the workflow, you get rid of clutter and create an environment that has more transparency. The second S, which stands for setting in order, enables you to arrange items so that they are easy to use, find, and put away. In hospitals and health systems, environments of care are shared by multiple clinicians, and having a designated place for supplies and equipment reduces their amount of time that they spend searching for items needed to deliver patient care. The third S is to shine, which means to keep the work area and items neat, clean, and functioning properly. This principle translates into a workspace that has labels with clear signage, products that go together that are color-coded to identify what belongs together as you deliver patient care, equipment that is fully charged and ready to go, a space that's allocated for the equipment and storage, instructions on how to use, repair, clean, and restock items, removing any ambiguity associated with the task that you need to maintain those items in storage. So this is especially important for storage spaces as each staff member plays a role in the tasks associated with ongoing maintenance. Now, the fourth S is to standardize, which is to create workplace consistency with tasks, knowledge, and expectations. When everyone knows the rules on how to share clinical areas with their colleagues, it alleviates the tension that can build when stakeholders are unaware and they start to make changes independently without consulting with anyone or getting input from their colleagues. This happens more often than you think. Having your staff organize the environment using the 5S for Safety framework to systematize placement of items facilitates standardization. The fifth S now is to sustain. This is achieved by making a habit of maintaining the workplace and adhering to standards. Sustainment is always the hardest part of any project. Healthcare is a constantly evolving environment, so creating environments or workspaces that are user-friendly, flexible, with minimal maintenance once established, it really supports frontline staff in delivering patient care. A collaborative approach to designing and monitoring the environment of care enables stakeholders to take accountability for what was implemented, which helps sustain 5S improvements over time. So if they bought into it, they feel responsible, there's a level of pride in what was designed, and they definitely want to see it last over time and be successful. Sustainment, like I mentioned before, is one of the biggest challenges with any project. So having a structure for systematic reporting of data helps with visibility on how your 5S project is maintaining, and when you need to revisit a space to ensure the introduction of new factors within that clinical care area don't impede on the improvements made. So let's talk about how we apply the 5S for Safety framework when you are space and transitioning planning, whether it's for a new space or an existing space. So the 5S for Safety framework is an excellent method to deploy when planning and transitioning staff, supplies, and equipment into a new space. Some examples involve designing a new facility or renovating an existing one. As we all know, it's easier to plan for a space that is unoccupied, as there will be no interruptions for patient care. However, you will find more scenarios that involve optimizing an existing space while patient care is in progress. So that just adds another layer of complexity when you're trying to execute a 5S project when patient care is going on and you need to rearrange the space while staff are trying to deliver their care. So there are instances when clinical departments experience a growth in volume and they need to optimize their current space to avoid relocation. The 5S for Safety framework enables staff to do more with the space constraints of their existing location. Other scenarios involve relocating to a space that is smaller than what was previously had, or implementing a new technology in a space to improve productivity, and that technology requires a systematic environment to yield the maximum benefit of the investment in the actual technology. So no matter what the scenario calls for, the 5S for Safety framework teaches staff how to manage operational inputs that drive the environment, which addresses space management. They are taught how to control their inventory efficiently and prioritize the placement of supplies and equipment at the point of use based on frequency, urgency, and utilization. Having frontline staff provide accurate information about the materials needed and the placement of those materials to operationalize the new space is crucial in designing floor plans that will support their workflows. By enhancing stakeholders' capacity to operate efficiently while incorporating their subject matter expertise into space designs and transition plans, you can really achieve some amazing results. In order for staff to provide that feedback, whether it's to an architect or to their department leadership, they really need to have an education. They need to be educated on the 5S for Safety methodology so they can understand how the environment impacts their workflows. The collaborative planning approach enables the interdisciplinary teams to eliminate inefficiencies before they even start, as everything is planned for, down to the smallest details, which are often overlooked when constructing new spaces. As we all know, the devil is in the details. So if you don't pay attention to every single detail, it might come back to bite you later on when you're in the new space. So designing a new floor plan is a large component of space planning, but outfitting the space to support the workflows of the occupants in advance of operating in the space is just as important. The 5S plus safety methodology addresses this gap by aligning all of the stakeholders involved in planning for a smooth transition into the new environment of care. An added benefit of applying the 5S plus safety framework to space and transition planning is that it helps with culture change. As the 5S methodology, inside of the approach has a change management component built into the process. So as you go through the process of working with your colleagues and your leadership and the architects and the contractors, you're building a team. So you're building up that team spirit, you're communicating, and it really kind of helps with culture change, because a lot of projects, they kind of focus on the technical change, which is the actual space, and they kind of blush over the people side of change. And the people side of change is really what brings everything to life. So let's talk about the 5S application within healthcare. So there are many applications within a healthcare where the 5S plus safety framework can be easily utilized to facilitate environments of care. 5S methods and tools can be applied to space and design planning of storage locations that support clinical workflows. This includes, but is not limited to, clean supply rooms, instrument rooms, equipment rooms and alcoves, surgical suites, recovery bays, patient rooms and carts, utility closets, on-site central distribution warehouses that supply chain uses, pretty much any location storing materials needed for patient care. It can also be used for technology and software that require the systematized environments to support automated inventory replenishment or real-time asset management. Technology within clinical settings is only as effective as the workflows and behaviors driving the system. So taking that into consideration, if the environment of care does not support organization or daily sustainment of materials needed by the staff, implementing a technology that needs these features to be successful will not work. The 5S plus safety framework covers in detail the right amount of inventory to keep on hand and the best locations to store items depending on how those items are used by your staff. This enables staff to effectively designate placement of supplies and equipment, as well as create appropriate par levels for replenishment. In a field where seconds can make all the difference for patient care, having what is needed, when it's needed, where it's needed, it's essential for frontline staff to do their jobs safely and efficiently. When applying the 5S plus safety framework to a space requiring systematic organization for technology, the information provided by staff is utilized to program quantity and location of items to optimize software designed to enhance productivity. Now, standard space designs of room layout, size, and location across a facility is wonderful, but it's not necessary to employ 5S plus safety practices. The space efficiency framework is used more often than not to optimize spaces within clinical settings that already exist. It's a useful tool when healthcare organizations cannot absorb the cost of new construction, but they want to increase their services and patient volume. The 5S plus safety framework is very flexible, and it can adapt to address the needs of the current or future state environment that is being designed. Being able to create standards for various environments of care without compromising a clinician's ability to customize based on their patient needs really helps the adoption rate of the 5S plus safety methodology within healthcare. So what I want to do next is walk you through a bunch of different visual examples of 5S plus safety applications within healthcare. They say seeing is believing, and reviewing these illustrations within different storage locations can give the audience a better understanding of how the space efficiency framework can be used to meet your own organization's needs. So the first visual example I'm going to share with you is of the 5S plus safety framework being applied to an existing clean supply room within a post-anesthesia care unit, also known as a PACU. As you will see, the pictures of the clean supply room show the same space before and after a 5S plus safety application. There's a noticeable difference in the way the supplies and equipment are stored within the room prior to organizing materials in a fashion that optimized the retrieval process. The initial room layout included bulky storage solutions on both sides, and it made it difficult for any staff to retrieve products and to walk through the room and grab what they needed, especially if they needed it quickly. The limited clearance between the aisle presented non-compliance issues in the storage area, as there was potential for safety issues if someone tripped while navigating this very tight corridor. The fashion in which supplies, linens, and equipment were all combined in the same space created additional compliance issues, as staff were unaware that equipment and linens need to be covered if they were to share space with sterile supplies. The lack of visibility into the storage bins and no clear indication of what items were being stored within those bins only lengthened the time it took staff to retrieve items they needed for patient care. So after the 5S concepts were implemented in the supply room, the staff designated all items to be stored on one side of the room except for a small shelf that held gloves on the left side. So this gave staff more clearance as they walked from one end of the room to the other to grab supplies and equipment. And for the items that were placed on the small shelf, they put that there because they came in boxes. And they considered it was, the boxes being put in a bin was just too cumbersome for bin storage since they were retrieved and used all the time. The team moved forward with acquiring a clear bin system for improved inventory visibility, color-coded stickers on the bins to quickly recognize corresponding supply categories. They had sign holders on the walls to identify supply categories by location and color. And they installed flat wall panels to hang their supply bins, which created more space and movement for them to get around the room. So this supply room was one of 4 supply rooms within the PACU that was optimized using the 5S plus safety framework to relocate supplies and equipment occupying patient bays. Their ultimate goal was to increase capacity for improved OR throughput by having all of their patient bays available for patient care. So this was the outcome of their project. Let's talk about another application when you have a newly constructed space with new technology. So here is a visual example of a large-scale 5S application for clean supply rooms within a newly constructed space using new technology. So the project required systematized placement of supplies to facilitate the implementation of a weight-based inventory management technology that was introduced to the staff in the new hospital. So now the staff were tasked to create a standardized layout for all clean supply rooms in the new facility, as the floor plans had standard supply rooms centrally located on each unit to support patient care. The team used the 5S plus safety framework to create standard product categories, along with a standard layout that would be applied across all units. The 5S plus safety training session involved 2 to 3 nursing staff representatives from each unit, along with clinical stakeholders from supporting departments. As you will see, there is visual signage on the walls showing you the supply categories and their location within the room. The clear bins located in the sections beneath the signs have corresponding colored stickers to quickly identify supplies belonging to that category. You saw this also in the previous example of the existing clean supply room. So the use of clear bins serves as a visual cue to assist with the replenishment of inventory as stock levels are more transparent. Luckily, the new supply replenishment technology didn't have to rely on visual management cues to send products that were needed on the units. That was the point of implementation. Items that required secured access have a locked storage solution to support retrieval based on regulatory requirements. So all of the rooms have products that are out in the open that you can easily grab. and go. And then there were some items that you actually had to punch in your information to grab. And it was just, the regulatory requirements that were established moving into the new building. So the standard room layout and design by staff provided not only an opportunity to organize their supply storage spaces, but it gave them an opportunity to quickly acclimate to other units as the layouts were standardized across floors. They're pretty much identical. So it's very common for nurses to float between different units based on staffing and patient acuity needs. The 5S plus safety framework allowed them to use their muscle memory so they could quickly familiarize themselves with units that were outside of their normal home base. It also helps acclimate traveling nurses and clinicians when outside resources are needed to support patient care. You can imagine the amount of travel nurses and clinicians that were called onto different hospitals during the first wave and second wave of the pandemic. So this is a very useful tool. Standard operating procedures were created in advance of the transition to help educate staff on the design of their clean supply rooms, and also set expectations for those clinicians who didn't have the opportunity to participate in the 5S training and design sessions. In addition, room maps were created and installed on the interior door of each supply room to assist with wayfinding inside of the clean supply rooms should anyone forget where to go or retrieve items, or if there was just someone who was never even part of the organization and they needed to, be an additional resource to help the team out to provide patient care. The room maps also contained instructions on who to contact about if they found a supply bin empty, because based on the technology, they shouldn't find anything empty, or if for some reason the technology was not working as intended. So an example would be if one of the bins was lopsided and it was tilted onto another bin, this would affect the weight, and the weight is how they would determine how to replenish the inventory. So that's an example of a new construction with new technology and how the 5S was applied. So now what we're going to do is review an example of the 5S plus safety framework being applied to a wheelchair equipment room within a rehabilitation facility. Now, this was part of a space relocation project. The rehab department was tasked with relocating to another floor to allow new construction of a medical surgical unit where they were previously located. So they were looking to expand their patient volume, and they had to downsize so that they can have more patients and still be able to treat them with the increase in a new space. But here was the caveat. Although the team was being given a renovated space and it was new, it was half the size of their existing location, which they felt was not going to be able to store the amount of equipment required to sustain their operations, let alone treat more patients because of the new opening of that med-surg unit. So the department needed to consolidate their wheelchairs, accessories, and repair shop all into one site. You can only imagine how scared the staff felt learning that they already thought they didn't have enough space to comfortably store, assemble, and repair wheelchairs, and then they were asked to move into a space that in no certain terms would meet their space requirements. To make matters worse, they were under time constraints because, they had to meet the renovation deadlines, and they had to evacuate their existing location before they started construction for the new med-surg unit. So in the before photo, they had to operate out of storage bins and rolling shelves when they moved into the new space due to the timing of construction. As you can see, the disorderly environment led to delays in providing patients with safe seating solutions, which impacted the length of stay and reimbursements. It also created a lot of frustration and tension for the team members who had to interact to get patients their wheelchairs. Staff spent significant amounts of time searching for wheelchairs and accessories, diminishing touch time for patient care. Their wheelchair inventory status was unknown at any given moment, which made procuring the appropriate seating system for a patient real challenging. After applying the 5S methodology to their space planning, they had a better understanding of wheelchair utilization and inventory requirements to make informed recommendations on the room layout and the storage solutions they needed to organize their space. The team decided to implement bulk storage racks, as you will see in the photo and the after picture, and that enabled them to co-locate their wheelchairs with their corresponding accessories right above. Staff implemented hanging sign holders to identify equipment by size and type. The systematized placement of items allowed for faster and safer retrieval of wheelchairs. The consolidation of wheelchair storage with the repair shop enabled the delivery of equipment for a full evaluation of patient transfers on the first day of treatment. Now, this obviously affects reimbursement. So this improved their ability to collect their reimbursement within the first 24 hours a patient was identified as needing a wheelchair. The organized equipment storage reduced staff efforts in obtaining seating systems, which improved rehab throughput and increased touch times with patients to address rehabilitation needs. It also improved the staff's morale and satisfaction. As you can only imagine, the frustration in working in an environment where it was kind of like an Easter egg hunt just to get their daily work done. Okay, now we're going to look at an example of a 5S application for a new equipment room in a new constructed space. So this 5S application is of a newly constructed equipment room in the same hospital where the 5S plus safety framework was applied for all the clean supply rooms. That was probably 2 slides back that I had showed you that photo. As you will notice, there is visible signage on the wall that designates placement for each individual piece of equipment. So the implementation of signboard strategy, it's also known as a visual management tool to sustain the environment, eliminates ambiguity for tasks associated with stored equipment. It alleviates the stress of knowing what to do in situations where clinicians find themselves with missing equipment or equipment that is not working when they have to attend to patient care. The signage includes a photo of the specific piece of equipment stored in that specific space, along with PAR level information, instructions on how to clean, charge the piece of equipment if necessary, and who to contact for replenishment and repair. This information makes it very clear what items belong where and provides details about all tasks associated with the maintenance of equipment stored in the room. Stakeholders decided to place emergency equipment closest to the entry and exit points within this equipment room and other items that were less frequently used toward the back corners of the rooms. They used a frequency versus urgency diagram to understand their utilization of each equipment for appropriate placement within the room to best support their workflow when they opened up this new equipment room in the new hospital. Electrical outlets were installed directly behind the machines, slightly below eye level, to promote ergonomic charging of equipment. In their previous equipment rooms, 1, there weren't enough outlets to charge everything, and 2, the outlets were normally stored on the floor. So it was a real encumbrance when you had to bend down, put something back, and plug it in. Half the time, people wouldn't even know where to look to plug in their equipment for use. So each piece of equipment was labeled with their room location, as some floors had multiple quantities of the same item stored in different equipment rooms. This was intended to keep an even distribution of items placed in storage areas consistent across units to reduce the travel distance of staff retrieving equipment for their patients. They kind of wanted them to stay close to their patients within the same unit on the floor because the floors are pretty big. Equipment was grouped and positioned by department within the rooms to expedite staff access and retrieval. So if you look at the photo, you will see the emergency management equipment across from the nursing equipment. The rooms also had sections for physical, occupational, and respiratory therapy equipment. There were rules for sustainment of the equipment rooms, and every team member understood that any changes had to be communicated to their colleagues within the shared space. The team even created an escalation path to identify stakeholders that were non-compliant with their designated storage allocations. And this was kind of fairly easy to do because since all the clinicians had a section dedicated to their department for equipment storage within the shared space, when you saw other equipment getting out of that allocation, it was easy to identify. It was a visual cue because everything had a specific spot. So eventually, the stakeholders that were non-compliant at times, because it wasn't always, there was an actual escalation path so that they can address the non-compliance and keep up with the sustainment practices. It's a lot easier when you have your colleagues saying, hey, why do you have 5 EKGs in here when there's only space for 2. And if you look at the par on the sign right there, it's 2. So people can't play the games of moving things around and keeping them permanently without going unnoticed. So now let's talk about a 5S application for supplies at point of use. So here you'll find a bunch of different supplies at point of use for patient rooms. And it was created for a new hospital with newly created patient rooms. So the 5S methodology was used as a space planning and transition strategy for a newly created 374-bed hospital, which also included a children's hospital. All of these designs were created with representatives from nursing, supply chain, infection prevention and control, regulatory, pharmacy, information technology, finance, facilities, and several other departments. The amount of input required to accomplish a standard of care at the bedside was necessary to capture everyone's operational needs. There was an adult standard and a children's standard of supplies implemented for every patient room in the new facility. On the left-hand side, you will see a picture of the electronic medication tower, which was a new technology that was introduced to staff as part of their relocation to the new hospital. So staff decided to keep personal protective equipment outside of the patient room in the overhead pull-down cabinets. And it was because of their workflow, and it was also dictated by infection prevention and control best practices. The IV solutions and needles were placed inside of the bottom drawers of the same electronic medication tower, as there was the same regulatory requirement for secured access of these items, and they were outside of the room. So this is the reason why they had to be locked up. After the supplies and their layout were standardized, custom plastic inserts were created for the electronic medication drawers to keep every supply in their assigned place, which can be seen clearly in the center photo. Inside of the patient room, stakeholders designated blood draw tubes and prep items to be stored inside of the pull-down storage solutions, as those are the materials needed to perform their most routine procedure at the bedside. The storage solutions inside of the overhead cabinets had a dual purpose. They were installed to keep items in their designated place and to facilitate ergonomic retrieval of supplies for all clinicians on the units, regardless of their height. So many of the nurses and the patient care techs or associates who worked on the units were under 5 foot 5 inches. That was, the height was between probably 5 feet, maybe 4'11" to 5'4". And the point of the pull-down storage solution was intended for easy access, to the cabinetry, so that they can grab their stuff without having to grab step stools or calling a colleague to get them what they needed as they're trying to attend to patients. So the innovative storage solution mitigated any safety and ergonomic concerns that were identified when they first created the cabinetry for the patient rooms. Now let's move on to the head wall. Each patient head wall had rails, which made movement of baskets filled with items easy to shift from side to side. So the baskets contained only a few urgent supplies, such as suction canisters and ambu bags. The team intentionally decided to keep a small number of items at the head wall to meet infection prevention and control standards, as well as minimize the waste of supplies within the rooms. Because whatever was stored at the head wall, whenever you get a new patient, from an IPC perspective, you had to just grab all those items and throw them away. So they were very mindful in how they designed and what they kept at the head wall. Okay, so now that we've reviewed some of the visual examples of 5S plus safety application within healthcare, I would now like to focus your attention on stakeholder participation, because this element of making sure the appropriate team members are included is really critical to the success of implementing and sustaining 5S plus safety improvements. It's important to include frontline staff in addition to their leadership when space and transition planning into a renovated or newly constructed area. They are the people that intimately know the work, understand the daily challenges, and can provide ideas that will improve the situation. There is sometimes a reluctance to involve colleagues with whom you have experienced prior conflict with or other uncomfortable situations when sharing a space. The 5S plus safety framework fosters collaboration that provides change management while optimizing storage. So the process addresses underlying people issues that stem from an unsupportive workflow or environment of care. In addition to involving these individuals who will be immediately impacted by the space changes, it is valuable to collaborate with other departments that provide services to your clinical settings. So when you're working within a hospital or health system, there are many stakeholders that sit in other areas of the organization who have a responsibility for specific components of an environment of care, even if they're not daily occupants of the clinical space. It's easy to forget them because representatives from their departments usually visit only when issues arise affecting their operations or when external agencies require interdisciplinary collaboration to meet certain requirements. And what I mean by regulatory agencies, I'm talking about Joint Commission, CMS, those DOH, those types of regulatory agencies. All departments who have a vested interest in the performance and outcomes of a clinical setting should be invited to share their lens of expertise so that their prerequisites can be accounted for as part of the space planning process. A few examples of departments that reside outside of clinical units are facilities, supply chain, regulatory, infection prevention and control, human resources, finance, information technology, pharmacy, and patient experience. I'm sure there's others, but I think I captured the bulk of the stakeholders that live outside that have a responsibility for the clinical care areas. The way the environment of care is set up affects outcomes that lie within their domain of accountability and reporting, which is why they must be involved with the 5S plus safety initiative. Having representatives participate from these departments, in addition to the local stakeholders who will occupy the space on a more frequent basis, increases opportunities to, one, build synergy, and two, collaborate in executing a 5S plus safety initiative that aligns with your organization's priorities. Now we'll review different methods for engagement. So, as you can imagine, there are several methods for engagement that you can use to garner participation for a 5S plus safety initiative. The first method is to communicate directly with your colleagues that currently share a space with you or will be sharing storage spaces with your team in the future. If you are currently sharing a storage space that is consistently or constantly a source of issues or complaints, getting your teammates on board to improve the situation will be a lot easier because they're suffering too and they want to make it better, trust me. If you are going to share a storage space in the near future, you can reference the existing issues that highlight the need for a structured plan to avoid the same mistakes repeating in a new space. So making them aware that you are planning a 5S initiative specifically focused on outfitting the supplies and equipment needed on the floor to support patient care is key for them understanding why they want to, collaborate with you. What is the value that they'll receive as being part of the team and getting this accomplished. So the other thing you need to do is create a one-page document. It's also known as a charter, and it summarizes the initiative for stakeholder management. On the charter, there are sections to list team members and department leaders who will champion your collective project. Scheduling a project kickoff meeting with the leadership and stakeholders identified on the charter can help spearhead the changes and provide support in addressing the challenges that impact the overall progress of your 5S plus safety initiative. Establishing a meeting cadence with all participants creates a forum to coordinate 5S plus safety training activities, discuss milestones accomplished or not accomplished, and other important tasks associated with project implementation. you definitely want to have a pulse check so that everyone is aware of the status and what needs to get done so we can finish and be successful. So facilitating 5S plus safety training sessions with stakeholders listed on the charter will be essential for educating them on how to plan for supplies and equipment in a shared environment. The duration of 5S plus safety training sessions will be contingent upon several factors, such as the number of staff from the different teams available to participate, their availability to be away from patient care assignments for a specific period of time, and the conference space available to conduct educational activities, because you're going to have all of these people congregating in one room to do some space planning and learning of 5S plus safety concepts. Communicating with clinicians that 5S training is an opportunity to contribute their input into how their new storage areas will be outfitted to support their daily routines is another incentive to get them involved. It also helps to have staff who previously were involved in a 5S plus safety initiative share their experience, appreciation for collaboration, and the value of an organized environment. This also promotes further engagement and participation. You know, if I heard from my colleague that, hey, there was a 5S plus safety event in their area and it really improved the collaboration, the organization, and overall the morale, I'm more likely to want to participate because it's someone that I work with and I trust and I believe what they're telling me. So always having someone who maybe have already had a successful experience is great in helping you pitch and try and recruit people for your 5S projects. So let's get into the subject of teamwork a little deeper. So they say it takes teamwork to make the dream work. And this couldn't be more accurate for successfully implementing a 5S plus safety project within your healthcare organization. Taking an integrated approach allows you to deliver stakeholder expertise from each area involved in the space planning and transition process. Everyone holds a piece of the puzzle that will account for the successful implementation and sustainment of the 5S plus safety initiative. This includes departments that supports clinical settings regardless of their physical location in proximity to where the space optimization work is being conducted. This all-inclusive collaboration enables stakeholders to set forth opportunities, supported by data, of course, to help prioritize and execute 5S projects. It creates a sense of ownership for those involved, it builds accountability, and it facilitates resources to support 5S improvement efforts pre and post implementation. A key factor in sustaining improvements over time is having continuous access to data to show how a particular physical location is performing and having operational metrics that are designated at the onset of a 5S initiative. So going into a project, if everybody agrees these are the operational metrics we're going to track, no one, when the project is over, is going to have to kind of start from scratch and start looking at data. If you have it on the front end, you'll have it on the back end. It'll be a lot easier to track and monitor. So let's talk about when stakeholders are not included. When stakeholders are not included in the initiation phase of a 5S project, the likelihood of providing and sharing data to measure and sustain improvements diminishes. Departments want to be included prior to plans being underway so they can feel that they are being seen and heard during the process. Data in general is viewed as proprietary and sensitive in nature, so there is always an air of protectiveness surrounding the sharing of information. If stakeholders can't trust you to include them when planning a 5S plus safety project, they will most likely not trust you with reporting information that's specific to impacts related to their area of operations. A big benefit of getting everyone involved from the beginning is establishing transparency about what measures will be reported by each department and how all the measures will contribute to the monitoring and sustainment of 5S space optimization projects. There's also a sense of safety in numbers, and that applies to reporting metrics when you have a group of departments providing a small piece of an overall picture to show how a 5S plus safety initiative is performing. Everyone is interested in the project success because they have skin in the game, and their data is proof of that commitment. So as we all know, theory does not always translate seamlessly into practice, no matter how much effort and planning is involved. It's time to discuss the challenges and successes encountered with small and large-scale applications of a 5S for Safety initiative. The larger the 5S application, the more people will need to be involved, which means there will be lots of perspectives to manage, include and accommodate. Most implementations experience hiccups along the way as there are many moving parts to balance in addition to stakeholders' expectations and consensus of space designs. Agreement on space allocations take longer when the 5S for Safety application is large scale. One example is when you're using this framework to roll out standardized supply rooms, equipment rooms, and point of use locations for a new hospital or clinical facility. The concept of standardizing supplies and equipment can make some clinical stakeholders uncomfortable because they worry that one size does not fit all and flexibility is needed. Clinicians have expressed how patient care is tailored to an individual's needs. Therefore, the supplies and equipment used to treat those needs should be different. What they soon discover upon implementation is that the 5S for Safety framework is flexible enough to accommodate standardization while leaving room for customization to treat patients with similar individual needs. Another challenge is determining supply and equipment space allocations for multiple stakeholders when their supply and equipment footprint significantly exceeds the storage space available. This happens more often than not. Everyone involved feels like their items need to be prioritized and positioned where it's easiest for them to access their tools. What's great about the 5S for Safety framework is that it provides an equitable method of negotiating locations based on stakeholders' actual workflows. Staff must get comfortable with making concessions and sharing, as every department needs their supplies and equipment to effectively collaborate in delivering patient care. There are lean tools that support decisions being established and finalized on what would work best for everyone involved. This collaborative approach in applying the 5S for Safety concepts is what enables the overall success in mitigating safety risks and inefficiencies from the start of occupancy in a shared clinical setting. I would like to cover the subject of performance metrics and how those measures can assist key decision makers in prioritizing and investing in 5S improvement efforts. People spend their time and money where they see value. If you can clearly articulate the financial impacts and benefits of the 5S project you want to conduct, you will likely garner support from those decision makers who oversee or have significant influence over your area. A 5S for Safety initiative offers the ability to realize substantial improvements with minimal expense. While we're on the topic of expenses, there are always small expenditures associated with investing in the implementation of visual management tools for storage spaces as part of a 5S for Safety project. Expenses can increase if stakeholders identify storage solutions that will allow them to store more volume in a small space, which is why it's important to incorporate all available data to make better informed decisions about the value received in exchange for the expenses incurred. Given the increasing demands on hospitals and health systems to improve quality, safety, cost, delivery, morale, and patient experience, the 5S for Safety methodology offers an approach that can address these goals. Optimizing clinical settings to best support patient care comes with an array of benefits, not only for the patients, but for the healthcare providers. As I mentioned before, it's important to involve as many stakeholders as possible who have responsibility over a shared clinical environment as they provide operational data at the onset of space optimization projects. Their data can help you to substantiate any expenses incurred as part of the initiative. Improvements achieved through optimization of the workspace can then be financially quantified and monitored using a standardized model of organizational metrics. Dashboard centralization of this data provides transparencies for those departments who participated, and they could want to continue tracking and sustaining the 5S improvements over time. This visibility enables healthcare providers to respond to changes in their environment of care when these key performance indicators slide. Return on investment calculations include the proposed key performance data provided by stakeholders to determine the total value of the project. Enterprise transparency of the KPIs by location supports 5S for Safety project sustainment. So let's take a deeper dive now into some of the most common key performance indicators used by hospital and health systems. I think I have a little bit more time. Many of you are familiar with the themes of quality, safety, cost, delivery, morale, and patient experience. These KPIs are being driven by a shift in the way healthcare services are being reimbursed by insurance payers and government agencies like Medicaid and Medicare. The reimbursement model I'm referring to is called value-based care, also known as pay-for-performance, which is gaining traction among healthcare organizations. Essentially, providers are being paid based on the quality of care they deliver to their patients rather than the quantity of care being delivered. When you initiate a 5S plus safety project, your participating stakeholders provide operational data that ties into these high-level objectives. Each operational metric that is improved by optimizing the environment of care has financial impacts that can be captured. A lean environment always occupies a smaller footprint. So an example of the financial benefit associated with this reduction in space would be the cost of real estate per square foot saved. Depending on your state, the cost per square foot inside of a medical institution can range in price, anywhere from $350 to $1,200 a square foot. So the savings can be substantial. Another example is organizing your storage space to meet regulatory requirements as part of your 5S initiative. I'm sure you have come across many supply and instrument tray rooms where there is an 18-inch clearance from the ceiling where items are being stored, or products are not 6 inches off the ground with liners on the bottom storage shelf, or the necessary clearance between aisles and doors for staff to maneuver within these rooms. When CMS and Joint Commission find these issues during site visits, your organization will receive non-compliant citations. When they are not resolved in a timely fashion, these citations have financial penalties. So it behooves the hospital and healthcare systems to have a framework that organizes their storage areas to enable their staff to sustain a compliant environment. There are many more examples I can share, but this should give you an idea of how you can tie back 5S improvements in a manner that your executive leadership teams can understand and validate. Okay, I think I have 2 minutes. There are many benefits that can be achieved through implementation of the 5S plus safety framework. Aside from avoiding tense interactions with your colleagues over limited storage space, you can significantly improve quality, safety, cost savings, delivery morale, and patient experience by preventing inefficiencies that result from disarray of supplies and equipment. Patient care is already stressful enough to deliver without the added pressure of dealing with interruptions related to the ineffective environment of care. By organizing the environment of care in advance of moving in, staff's time and effort associated with searching for patient care items can be drastically reduced, if not eliminated, which improves safety for care providers and patients alike. Space occupants can acclimate faster to their new surroundings because of standardization and visual management tools. As I mentioned before, standardization helps with muscle memory, as you can expect to encounter the same layout and experience whenever you enter a storage space. Visual management tools remove ambiguity out of performing tasks to sustain storage areas, which alleviates the need for staff to scramble whenever an item is missing or not functioning properly. The process of participating in 5S plus safety training lends itself to better engagement and collaboration with peers, as there is a sense of team spirit when you transition jointly into a newly renovated or constructed space. It helps with sustainment of storage areas, as clinicians on the floors have a sense of ownership and pride in what they designed, therefore feel accountable to maintain what was implemented. Departments also have an understanding that any changes with the placement or quantity of supplies and equipment on hand needs to be communicated to others who share storage space, as modified footprint allocations impact everyone. The 5S methodology fosters an environment to build trust among colleagues, which empowers frontline staff to make changes when needed, as they have a framework to make better informed decisions. It can also serve as a catalyst for continuous improvement, as the concepts are applicable to other materials beyond clinical supplies and equipment. Okay, now that I've explained the 5S plus safety methodology and walked you through several real-life applications within healthcare, I would like to quickly recap all of the themes covered in detail. Based on the information shared, you should now be familiar with the 5S plus safety framework and know what each 5S stands for. Understanding how the space optimization structure can be applied, you will ideally be able to recognize opportunities within your own organization to utilize 5S plus safety principles within clinical settings. We reviewed how integrating key stakeholders at the onset of 5S space planning and transition projects is valuable for getting project buy-in, collecting data, creating designs, and moving forward with implementation and sustainment after improvements are initiated. Another key takeaway is providing a transparent platform for performance metric reporting at the beginning of 5S initiatives, which will allow everyone to quantify, monitor, and most importantly, sustain your improvements over time. We have finally arrived at the end of this presentation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for your time and interest in learning more about how to optimize your storage spaces using a collaborative approach that can mitigate tension between different stakeholders sharing an environment of care. Now more than ever, hospitals and health systems are aiming to provide zero harm care, and it starts with the environment. I hope I have highlighted the importance of using the 5S methodology within clinical settings to improve safety and remove inefficiencies that are hiding in plain sight. I know now that we're going to be opening the floor for questions, but if you have more information you want, you can reach me using the contact details on the page.
Yeah, Monique, thanks so much for that awesome presentation. I definitely appreciate that. Because we have run close to the end of our time, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions, but I do want to float one by you that I thought was really helpful. When you're doing a 5S project, I mean, we all would agree that organized is better than messy, but is there any particular data point or metric that you measure to show the improvement or how it's actually helping?
Yes. So there's a lot. So the wheelchair example that I gave, we were able to track the time when the request was made for a wheelchair from the time that the patient actually received the wheelchair. So we had data from the stakeholders that showed, because we organized the space, consolidated everything, they were able to get the wheelchair in the morning hours, and they reduced their delivery time by 3 hours by organizing the space. So there's definitely data to show cycle time and tact time.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important, because it's not just that people are happier, the space is brighter, it's easier to move around, but it has real patient impact on how quickly you can get your slides to do your job.
Exactly, it really does.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that awesome presentation on space optimization. If there were any questions that you asked that we didn't have an opportunity to get to, feel free to reach out to Monique based on her contact information, and I'm sure she'd be happy to connect with you and get those answered. We are going to take a short 15-minute break now before the next session. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you soon for a discussion dedicated to sterile storage successes. Thanks, everyone.